ladies and gentlemen, good evening. First of all, I can't see anybody, so I assume there's somebody out there, but all I can see is bright lights. First of all, I just want to thank the organisers for inviting my wife, Tina Mathieson, and myself to be your guests tonight, and for giving me the opportunity to address this august gathering. Today is day 774 of my tenure as the President of the University of Hong Kong. It has been a lively, stimulating, and often very challenging period of my life. And if I tried to tell you about all 774 days, it would take all evening and you would never get any dinner. So in the course of my remarks, I'm going to tell you about 3 of those 774 days. Days number 1, 185, and 667. On each of those days, interactions with the media played a very significant part. Now, of course, interactions with the media played a significant part in many of the other 771 days as well, but I won't go into details on those. I will also use this opportunity to talk about 3 other things. 1, my plans for the future of the University of Hong Kong. 2, my assessment of the young people of Hong Kong. And 3, some comments on freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and the importance of principles. So day 1 of my time in the job was the 1st of April 2014. April Fool's Day was a very good choice. On the day before that, I asked some university staff to check the short speech in Cantonese that I had prepared. And I will never forget the rather concerned expression on my new colleague's face when I practiced my speech. She politely said, well, it's okay, but there are a few changes needed. My Cantonese teacher in the UK was from Malaysia. And it turned out that some of the pronunciations I had learned had given me a Malaysian accent. I therefore had about 12 hours to learn the corrected pronunciations before the next day. So when I arrived at work on the 1st of April 2014, I was met by a very large media stand-up. This was a totally new experience for me at that stage, but it was a taste of my new life and something which subsequently I've become much more accustomed to. I decided to launch straight away into my remarks, and I just said, Joe-san, and then I said, No ho weng hung, ho go heng, lung gao sing wai, Hong Kong Dai Hok, Dai Sup Gai Hao Jiong. No wui, no lick. No wui, no lick. Tong Hok Sung, Lo Si, Tong Si, Hao Yao, Yet Sai, Mai, Hong Kong Go Feng, Dote. So this was my introduction to Hong Kong. And one of the more pleasing pieces of coverage in the press that I've received so far was in the South China Morning Post the next day, when it said, Mathieson surprised the media by speaking in fluent Cantonese. They didn't say without a Malaysian accent, but every one of those words that I said on my first day still applies today, and I will say a bit more about the specifics of taking the university to new heights in a moment. Day 185 of my tenure was the 2nd of October 2014. This is referred to by my Director of Communications, Catherine Ma, and others as Wet Shirt Day. It was that evening that I went to the centre of the Occupy protests in Admiralty, together with Joseph Sung, President of Chinese U. In order to understand what happened that night, you first have to realise that I've known Joseph Sung for many years. My original work in Hong Kong was at Chinese U, where I was the external examiner in medicine twice, about 12 years ago. Joseph was at that time Professor of Medicine and therefore my host. So when I took up my present role, I already knew him. In the run-up to the protest, we had agreed that if we ever decided to go to the protest site, we would go together. During the day of 2nd of October, I had been in regular communication with my students, and it was clear that the situation in Admiralty was deteriorating. At about 10 o'clock in the evening, I asked Yvonne Leung, the then president of the Hong Kong U Student Union, whether she thought it would help if I went down there. And she said yes, she thought it would. So I said, okay, I'll come. I phoned Joseph and I said, I'm going to go. And he said, okay, when? And I said, now. And he said, now? Oh, okay, I'll come with you. So I told Tina I was planning to go, and she said, why? And I said, I don't know really, it just feels like the right thing to do. And then she said, what are you going to say? And I said, I don't know, I'll think of something. So you can see this was not a carefully thought through piece of strategy. This was an emotional and instinctive response to a situation. Joseph and I met in the lobby of a hotel, and we were led through by our students through a complicated path over bridges and through underpasses, taking us to the edge of the huge crowd. Students then formed a cordon around us, holding hands and allowing us to push through the crowds. There were a lot of your media colleagues there, bright lights, microphones. The crowds were shouting and cheering, chanting, Hao Zheng, etc. I remember one journalist saying to me, how does it make you feel when you hear them cheering you? And my answer was, embarrassed. Because that was true, because I had never experienced such a reaction before. We got to the front of the crowd outside Legco, where there were armed police inside the fences and a huge crowd pushing forwards towards them. The atmosphere was tense, it was very hot and stressful, hence the wet shirts. A metal stepladder appeared from nowhere, and I climbed up it with a megaphone to give my speech. I don't really remember exactly what I said, but I tried to appeal for calm and for everyone to put safety first. I do remember exactly what Joseph said after he came down the stepladder after taking his turn to speak. He said, I just repeated what you said, I'm just your interpreter now. That was a memorable evening, and I have no regrets about going there, but I do realize it was risky and it could have gone wrong. Day 667 of my tenure was the one day which led me to condemn the behavior of some of our students. This was 26th of January 2016, when I was besieged in a building after the University Council meeting, and when I tried to leave, I was engulfed in a crowd where my safety and the safety of others was in significant danger. My statement about this the next day has led some, including some of your members, to accuse me of changing sides or succumbing to pressure. I totally refute that accusation. I have always been consistent, and I have always emphasized that safety and security should come first. It wasn't my attitude that changed after that night, it was the risk to personal safety that changed. And anyone who was not in the middle of that crowd that night has no business telling me how it felt or how I should react. So, on balance, what do I think of the youth of Hong Kong now, after 774 days working with them? Although I've just made reference to the behavior of some students on one occasion, it should not be taken as a sweeping statement on the youth of Hong Kong. I am extremely impressed with Hong Kong U students and with those other young people that I've met outside the university, in schools and at various public occasions. The vast majority of young people in Hong Kong are polite, studious, and respectful of authority. I've taught 3 classes at Hong Kong U and 1 at Chinese U. The students are intelligent, hardworking, and courteous, and they ask searching questions. I just do not recognize the allegation that the youth of Hong Kong today are generally rebellious, aggressive, rude, or inconsiderate. That is certainly not my experience. Hong Kong U students are also sometimes accused of being spoilt and unappreciative of the educational opportunities being offered to them. Again, this is not my experience. About 40% of Hong Kong U students are from underprivileged backgrounds. They value education and want to do the best they can. Our students are a delight, and I am very proud of them. When I've visited universities overseas, Hong Kong U students on exchange there have without exception made a very good impression. For example, when I was in Oxford and Cambridge universities in February, they were both actively pleading with us to send them more Hong Kong U students because they contribute so much to their colleges. Please don't give up on the youth of Hong Kong or despair for their future. They are talented and terrific. We should be proud of them. They need our guidance and our confidence. Now, about the future of the University of Hong Kong, the strapline of our vision for the next 10 years of Hong Kong U is Asia's global university. And we have 4 headings which all begin with the letter I: internationalization, innovation, interdisciplinarity, and impact. I don't have time to go into great detail about each of these, but I'll say just a few words about each. The first I is internationalization. We are already a very international university with over 60% of our professors and about 35% of our students coming from outside Hong Kong. In fact, in the Times Higher ranking of International Outlook, published in January 2016, Hong Kong U was ranked the 3rd most international university in the world. However, we want more, both here on campus and also outside Hong Kong. Here, we want all of our activities in teaching and research to encourage global thinking. We talk about global issues, we encourage international perspectives. We get visiting speakers from all over the world. You hear multiple different languages being spoken on our campus. Outside Hong Kong, we've pledged to create opportunities to study or work abroad for 100% of our students by 2022. Some of these will be joint or dual degrees with top universities in various countries. Some will be experiential learning opportunities, some will be internships or student exchanges. There are sound educational reasons for believing that our students will benefit from getting outside their comfort zones and working in unfamiliar parts of the world. The second I is innovation. We want this to apply to everything we do in teaching, research, and knowledge exchange. Carrying on doing things exactly the same way they've always been done is no longer acceptable if we're going to compete in the modern world. For example, in our teaching, we're using flipped classrooms, MOOCs, called Massive Open Online Courses, and SPOCs, which is the opposite, Small Private Online Courses, plus various other modern forms of electronic learning. The third I is interdisciplinarity, which must apply to both our teaching and our research. The major problems facing the world will only be solved if people from different disciplines work together. We are a comprehensive university, and we have great opportunities to form interdisciplinary groups that will be stronger than the sum of their constituent parts. Finally, the fourth I is impact. This means making a difference to the world, to society, to policy, to knowledge. It could mean improving the quality of life of one isolated elderly or disabled person in a rural area somewhere, or changing the world with a major advance on climate change, green energy, air pollution, or water safety. Impact should be the aim of everything we do. It can be big or small, fast or slow, local, regional, or global, but it must be something that makes a difference. The biggest impact we can have is changing lives through education. Everything good that has happened to me in my life has been the direct result of education. I consider my job now as the head of Asia's Global University to be to provide those same educational opportunities for others, irrespective of social class, race, ethnicity, or area of interest. And Hong Kong is a wonderful place to do that. Finally, I couldn't address this audience without touching on freedom of speech, confidentiality, the Hong Kong U injunction, etc. I'm a firm believer in principles and in sticking to them. My wife calls me stubborn, but I prefer to use the term I used earlier, consistent. So, as a staunch defender of freedom of speech and the importance of a free press, what do I think about the injunction taken out by Hong Kong U in connection with the leakage of confidential information from our council meetings? The final hearing is due in 10 days' time, and clearly I cannot preempt the court's decision. All I can say is that the principle of confidentiality is one that I believe in. The effectiveness of the working of the University Council was seriously damaged by leaks and by the illicit recording of confidential discussions. So when the former council chair, Dr. C.H. Leung, decided to seek an injunction, the council, including me, later supported that decision. Sometimes my principles and yours may clash, but I think there are more principles that we share and that we will stand together to uphold than there are that divide us. The media and the university need to understand one another and work together wherever possible. I hope it will be very rare for those interactions to end up in the courts, but when they do, we all have to accept the ruling of those courts and move on. Now I need to wrap up so that you can have your dinner. I'm sorry if I've disappointed you by not giving you some sound bites for tomorrow's headlines, by talking about Hong Kong independence, Johannes Chan, the role of the Chief Executive as Chancellor, research misconduct, or the use of offshore bank accounts. However, let us agree that there are some areas which are off limits for this evening. I've tried to tell you something about my attitudes, about my experiences so far in Hong Kong, about my view of the youth of Hong Kong, and about my plans for the future of the University of Hong Kong. I've also touched on the freedom of the press and my hope that we can continue to work together successfully, understanding each other's principles and each other's needs. Thank you again for inviting me, and I hope you all enjoyed the rest of the evening. Dotse Daiga.